Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Edward.
But I thought, is it's the Jubilee today? Oh, is it? Throw some English in.
How many years?
Is the platinum?
Is it a round number?
70 years?
70, yeah.
I don't know how many of the actual celebrations should be attending, but it's all sort of focused on today. So.
It'll be interesting to see what happens when she dies. Well, and especially, I think in Canada, I think Canada and Australia are destined for republic very soon after she dies. Because I think there is still just, as a Canadian, I'm not a royalist at all. And there's just deep affection for it. But there is not.
What does Charles do? What I hear from her is she's very, the rumor was that she sort of never forgave her own daughter. The Queen Mother. Wow. Well, there is. But yeah, that'll be really interesting to see what happens. And I'm glad to be a
I think so. Is Mr. Vera? I haven't.
Sound check, sound check, sound check.
Good morning. Despite what your order of worship says, I am not Bryna Bloom. I am Joni Paddock, and I will be your worship associate this morning. Unfortunately, Bryna was not feeling well, so I told her I would happily pinch hit for her. So I'm actually going to read you her words of welcome, okay? So this is not me I'm talking about, it's Bryna. Okay, as she says, I'm Bryna Bloom, but I'm not. Your worship associate today, proud to be working on the day we celebrate the backbone of our congregation, its volunteers. She says, I stand up here today as chair of both the worship team and the care team. I also facilitate a chalice circle. You may think, gee, that's a lot. You'd be wrong because I get so much more out of it than I give. I've met so many nice people, I've made some very good friends, and I've learned so much. I believe I am a better, more well-rounded person because of my involvement here at uucod. And we're happy to have you, Brian. I know you're watching, so feel better. Before we begin, please take a moment to silence your cell phones. And as we begin, here at uucod, we acknowledge that we are on the historic homelands of the various bands of Cahuilla people, and we honor the unique relationship that we hope emerges between our community and the indigenous people and their traditional territories. Let this acknowledgement serve as a reminder to recognize, honor, reconcile, and partner with the Cahuilla people whose lands and water we benefit from today. We also want you to know that it doesn't matter where you or your ancestors are from, who you love, your gender identity, your theology, your politics, or your immigration status. We welcome all who are committed to our core values as expressed in our 7 principles. Together we come to this place to share our hopes, our dreams, and our visions. We seek to build a diverse and inclusive community that honors our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every being. Thanks for being with us this morning. If you're watching this service online, welcome. We're very glad you're with us. Please consider making a donation in our virtual offering basket. Your contribution is an important way to support UUCOD, and today we are also sharing the plate, and I'll be introducing our Share the Plate speaker shortly. You can click on the link that is in the constant contact that you received on Friday or the one that you will receive this morning. If you're here in the room, we will be taking a collection a little bit later in the service, and we welcome your offering at that time. Before we ring the Tibetan Bowl, we do have a few announcements. First, on behalf of the care team, if you have an emergency form and have not yet returned it, please complete it and return it. If you don't yet have one or have access to one, see me, and I'll try to figure out where they all are, but see me after the service and we'll make sure you get one. They are not intended to be busy work. They are so we can take care of you if anything happens while you're here. The congregational meeting follows today's service. Whether you are here in the sanctuary or watching from home, please attend. It's your congregation, and we want your participation. A couple more. Join us next Sunday as we celebrate the graduation of Thera Pacino, Rain Pacino, and Maddox Phillips, and wish them well as each begins the next chapter of their lives. They will have a table showcasing their lives, along with baskets for your cards and well wishes. While we are celebrating our graduates, we will also get seriously silly for our annual Red Nose Day photo, which will be taken after the service. You can buy your red noses from Walgreens for just $1, and I imagine we'll have a couple here, but please go and pick one up if you can. All money raised will fund critical programs that keep U.S. children safe, healthy, and educated, as well as fund programs that help Ukrainian children to make sure they are cared for both in the immediate aftermath and in the long term. If you won't be at service, you can still participate by taking a selfie and wearing your red nose, and send it to Denise Jansen Eager so she can include it in the count for our participation next Sunday. And finally, Script to Stage to Screen announces its final show for the season, I'm Not Rick Springfield by Vicki Vaudry. We've done a couple of her shows over the past years, and it's always been really, really good. It's a hilarious blend of hero worship, family dysfunction, and mistaken identity. It's Friday and Saturday nights this week, 7:30 here at the church. It's $10. You do have to reserve. You don't have to necessarily prepay, but you do need to reserve. There's information, I think, on the table out front. The church COVID precautions are followed. Everyone is vaxxed and masked for the whole performance. So now, Reverend Ian, if you would please ring our Tibetan Bowl, and we'll listen to our music for centering.
Good morning. Sorry, I didn't let you answer me. Good morning. I am the Reverend Ian Riddell, and I have the honor and delight of serving this congregation as its minister. However you found us, however many times you've been here with us in person or online, welcome. We are a congregation and a tradition that celebrates the richness and beauty of individual lives and commits to working together to weave a tapestry made stronger and more vibrant by our collaboration and by the sharing of our lives and our visions for a thriving future for all of life. We strive together to build the beloved community of resilience, hope, and love in the face of fear and apathy. We practice the opening of hearts, the working of hands, and the lifting of spirits in the service of love. And we share the sacred breath. We gather together to build the beloved community, breath by breath, word by word, note by note, step by step. We gather together to sing and speak and dance and breathe the beloved community into being. This is our work. This is our calling. This is our joy.
And now if you'd please join me for the chalice lighting, followed by the lighting of the BIOPOC candle. May love be the spirit of this church. May the quest for truth be its sacrament and service be its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, and to help one another in fellowship. This is our aspiration.
And now, as Linda lights our candles, I invite you to join me in speaking the words of our BIOPOC candle lighting. We light these candles in solidarity with Black, Indigenous, and other people of color as they journey toward spiritual wholeness. May we, as a beloved community, work to dismantle racism and all forms of oppression. May we live out our principles so that justice, dignity, and equity for all prevail.
Skated over painted ponies go up and down. We're captive on the carousel of time. We can't return, we can only look behind from where we came and go round and round and round in the circle game. So the years spin by and now the boy is 20. Though his dreams have lost some grandeur coming through. There'll be two dreams, maybe better dreams, and plenty before the last revolving year is through. And the seasons, they go round and round, and the painted ponies go up and down. We're captive on the carousel of time. We can't return, we can only look behind from where we came and go round and round and round in the circle game. Round and round and round in the circle game.
We're going to, thank you, choir, that was wonderful. Makes my Canadian heart happy. Little Joni Mitchell on a Sunday morning. We're going to take a little time now in our service to say thank you. Thank you to all of the volunteers who gave and give time and talent, sweat and imagination to help this beloved community function, grow, and thrive. Before the service started, on the screen, you saw dozens and dozens of names roll by. If you missed them, they'll be on the screen again during the postlude and after the service. I had originally planned to read out all the names, but there are so many volunteers to do the work of the congregation, it would have taken the whole service time just to read off the list of names. Our volunteers do so many things. They serve on our board, our personnel committee, our committee on ministry, our membership committee. They are our greeters, our ushers. They count the Sunday offering. They lead our chalice circles. They plan and lead our lifespan faith development classes. They plan and run our pledge drive. They care for each other, care for us on our care team and our stewardship team. They volunteer for audiovisual on Sunday mornings. They serve on our worship committee and serve as worship associates. They take care of our building and our sacred grounds in so many ways. They do the work of social justice. They serve on the committee. They march in the Pride Parade. They run and collect food and money for the Christmas drive, food boxes, the migrant education program, food on the 1st, socks on the 2nd. They help plan our Earth Week celebration this year. They come up with ideas and plan and make sure that our Share the Plate program works well. They work on our facilities, keeping our grounds clean and tidy and healthy. They work in hospitality, getting coffee ready for us. They plan and prepare our auction, our yard sale. They sing in our choir. They work on our hiring committees, our diversity, inclusion, and belonging ministry team, the 8th Principle Task Force, Beloved Conversations Among. They host book groups and film discussion series. They tidy up after our services. They paint the walls and make our space beautiful. And if you've done something for this congregation that I missed in that long list, I apologize. We love you too. And I want to share one of the questions I received this week. I'm not going to do them all in the sermon. One of the questions I received for our Ask Your Minister Anything Day. The question was this: I come to Sunday services, I sometimes attend church events, I pledge or drop money in the offering basket. Why should I volunteer? What's in it for me? Well, you heard Bryna's answer at the beginning of the service. Thank you, Joni, for that. And I imagine the answer is a little different. This is now my response. A little different for everyone who volunteers, but I think there are some things that many of us have in common. It is my firm belief that a community does not get built by just saying we are a community. Where I have seen community build most powerfully is when the people of that community work together to create things, to create something. When I conducted an LGBT and Allies choir in Victoria, British Columbia in the 1990s, the members of that choir came from many different sub-communities that often didn't get along or spend much time together. It was the early 1990s, so there was no internet. Believe that. But by singing together, by fundraising and planning and organizing and hosting potlucks and running sectional rehearsals and performing concerts and caring for the music library and for each other and picking music and leadership together, we built something really special. A community that could rely on each other. We did that not just by saying we were a community, but by working together. Now, volunteering is not just about supporting the congregation we are members of. Don't get me wrong, it is very much about that. We rely on volunteers for so much of what we do. Pam and Vanessa and Malcolm and Joel and I can't do all of it. Volunteers make those church events possible. Volunteers count the money that goes in the offering basket each week and make decisions based on our mission and strategic plan about how to use that money for our community. Volunteers make this worship service happen. Our worship associates, our AV folks, our choir members, our greeters and ushers, the folks who get coffee hour ready for us, the folks who stick around afterwards to tidy up and make sure the building is ready for the next event. It is about supporting this wonderful community and helping it grow and thrive. But it's also about building connections. Our choir members aren't just learning music when they gather together to rehearse each week. They are sharing their lives, building connections, offering each other support and challenged. The folks who get our coffee hour ready each week talk about that setup yet, but they also share what's going on in their lives, hear each other's stories, learn from each other. The conversation in that kitchen before service on a Sunday morning is often the most fascinating thing that happens. And I'm the preacher. Our board members and the members of our other communities do the work of managing and envisioning and making real the mission of the congregation, but they also bear witness to each other's pain and joy, offer words and acts of kindness and care to each other, and struggle together to understand our mission and to understand how we best live into it in the world. We cannot exist or thrive without all of these volunteers. So Joni is going to lead us now in saying thank you to everyone who has volunteered this year.
The bouquets that should be up on the screen shortly? Yeah, okay, I'm getting a yes, okay. They're dedicated to all of our volunteers. When there is a need, you came forward, and so we thank you. In the nighttime or daytime, on weekends, and even in the coldest, darkest part of the year, you helped, and so we thank you. Elected and duly appointed, or quietly, anonymously, and unbidden, you did what needed doing.
And so we thank you.
Sometimes with the help of many hands, other times alone. You worked.
And so we thank you.
You gave your time, talent, and even your treasure for the life of the congregation.
And so we thank you.
Your families and loved ones supported you in your efforts, worried for you when things piled up, and perhaps grumbled at you to the extent of your commitment. So we thank your families and loved ones. For all things great and small you have given this congregation, we take time today to recognize.
To thank you and to honor you.
And if I could ask for a round of applause for all these volunteers. Thank you, thank you, thank you, because without all of you, we wouldn't be able to do this every Sunday, so thank you. Thank you. And now it's time for our Share the Plate. Our Share the Plate today is the Community Food Bank at the Center. Every Thursday evening, the LGBTQ Community Center of the Desert, located in Palm Springs, provides free groceries for anyone in need. Over the past 4 months, they have seen an unprecedented increase in the number of people experiencing food insecurity. The steeply rising costs of living expenses since the beginning of this year have forced many households to allot their grocery money toward just being able to pay the rent or filling up the gas tank to get to work. As you can imagine, with so many hungry people in need, the center's pantry has been depleting more quickly than ever before. Guillermo Biro, who's the Senior Programs Manager and Community Food Bank Leader at the center, is here to tell us more and how we can help, and I'd like to ask Guillermo to come up to the pulpit.
Following the protocols. Good morning. My name is Guillermo Biro, and I'm here representing the LGBTQ Community Center of the Desert. I'm honored, grateful, and humble to be here today, and I thank you for giving us the space to briefly introduce you our community food center, community center, and our community food bank. So, as you heard today, we have faced unprecedented life experience, especially in the last 2 years, and we're proud to say that the center has been there for the community, at least providing the food that we need to support food insecurity. The Community Food Bank has been created around 10 years ago in 2011 and started as a small food pantry and has evolved today to an operation that we are serving currently between 220 to 250 households every week. Every Thursday, from 5 to 7 p.m. In the winter, in the dark, wearing flashlights, and in the summer at 110, 120 degrees on the street. Nothing has stopped us, even COVID. We didn't miss 1 day of service during COVID. And one of the reasons, and you guys are honoring volunteers here, is because our volunteers. This operation will not be possible without volunteers and the support of community like every one of you. It's humbling every week to be standing there because most of the time it's a misconception of what food insecurity looks like. People identified food banks with homelessness. Unfortunately, time has changed and people have to make decisions to put either food on their plate, pay a bill, pay for gas, or buy a medication. And this is why we have seen this huge increase. Before COVID, our operation was known as a client's choice. People were coming inside our small facility on Belardo Road to select the items they needed to bring home. Unfortunately, with COVID, we have to move our operation outside, and we currently run what we call a drive-through food bank operation, which around 40 volunteers every week who start working on Monday from putting the bags together, the non-perishables, to Thursday morning when the delivery comes from Find Food Banks, which is our major supporter, and we're an agency supervised by Find Food Bank and Feeding America, brings about 7 tons of food every Thursday morning. We put the bags together, and by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we're ready to serve the community. So this is briefly what we do. We're proud to do what we do with your support. If you want to get to know more about us, please come and visit us at the center. We have currently 2 facilities, one in Palm Springs, which is our major headquarters on North Palm Canyon Drive. And last year, we opened a small office in Coachella, who is helping the community in Coachella Valley, minorities and youth, LGBTQ youth. So we're expanding thanks to the kindness and good heart from people like you. And hopefully we can continue to do this food operation. It's real, hunger is real, and to see people coming every week in gratitude, no matter they're walking or taking a bus or carpooling to come to the food bank or in their own vehicles, no matter what brand of vehicles. We never judge what food insecurity looks like and the reason why people are there. So we thank you, and I'm going to be outside after the service. My husband is here today supporting me, Dennis. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to come close. I have some flyers, and thank you for the opportunity to be here.
If the ushers will come forward. Every week we ask you to give, and every week you give, and we are so grateful for your support of this community and our community partners in helping keep our valley fed and healthy and connected. Thank you for your generosity. These are the joys and sorrows of our community on this 15th of May. We light a candle for a joy. The earth is awake today. The choices are becoming limited. Allow all people to enjoy today. It brings the world joy. We light a candle for those killed in the Buffalo shooting and their loved ones. We hold you in our thoughts. We remember the lives lost, the senseless gun violence. Linda lights a candle for her friend Penny, who is having spinal surgery this week. May she feel peace throughout the procedure, and may it be successful. Linda also shares a thank you, a gratitude to the audiovisual team who worked tirelessly this week to bring us this week's service and our congregational meeting. Our computer died, but it was resurrected, thanks to the work of some IT folks and our diligent AV team who worked tirelessly to make sure it all came back. Cheryl shares the sorrow for Carol, her high school BFF, whose husband passed yesterday of a heart attack. And Jane and Mel share a joy for a granddaughter who has now received her license in speech and language pathology. They're very proud grandmas. And Joni lights a candle of remembrance for her dad, Charles Collins. 50 years ago on May 7th, 1971, he was taken from us far too soon in a tragic car crash. He was a gentle, caring, and loving man and a wonderful dad, Joni says. She says, "You are forever in my heart, Dad, and not a day goes by that I don't think of you. I look at your picture every morning. You'd be so proud of your legacy, your kids and our spouses, your grandkids and great-grandkids. You live on in our hearts. I love you, Dad." Thank you, Joni. And there are joys and sorrows, large and small, that remain in the quiet of our hearts, in the middle of this tumultuous world that we live in, that we participate in, that we experience. And so we pause now for a moment of quiet, comfortable in our seats, breathing deeply through our nose, and breathing in, even though if filtered by our masks, the air of this space. Feeling those around us here together. We may carry our individual joys and sorrows in our own hearts, but we know we are part of a larger heart, a larger community that holds us, sustains us, inspires us, and nurtures us. Community held together by breath, by love, by work, by hope. And so we pause now for a moment of quiet in the embrace of that community and the larger love which holds us all. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. May all beings know peace. May all beings know an end to suffering. May all beings know love. May it be so. And now I invite you to remain quietly in your seats as we sing together, and sing together our hymns for meditation, Spirit of Life and Fuente de Amor.
Sing
is a balm that soothes my spirit to hear you sing that. So we Unitarian Universalists like to ask a lot of questions. We are, after all, supposed to be engaged in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And I think that the best preaching is grounded in conversation between the minister's convictions and understandings, the needs of the world, our Unitarian Universalist tradition, and the needs and life of this congregation. My work as your minister is to figure out what those needs are and speak to them when I can and how I can. Sometimes I find that out just by listening to what's going on around me, but sometimes it's nice to ask directly. And so I have a habit, as many of my colleagues do, of offering a question box sermon every once in a while, giving you the opportunity to ask me questions directly, which I will answer in the pulpit. Now, some of my colleagues do this by putting a box out there on the Sunday morning and having people write questions, and then they pull the questions out of the box and answer the questions. I'm not quite that brave. And so I asked you to submit ahead of time, and this time I received 9 questions, one of which I've already answered about volunteering, some of which are about our congregation. Some of them are about our Unitarian Universalist tradition, and some of them are about me directly. And I said I would answer the questions, so I will answer them. A little note for those of you who aren't up on internet lingo, an AMA is not just the American Medical Association. An AMA is an online practice called Ask Me Anything. An author or a speaker or someone will go, usually on Reddit, will go and have an Ask Me Anything question, and people ask them questions, they respond. So today is Ask Your Minister Anything. Here are my responses to the other questions. And I'm just going to read the questions as they are. I'm not going to edit the questions, just so you know. The first one goes like this. Since this is Share the Plate Sunday, would you please talk about how this monthly practice contributes to our spiritual growth, both individually and as a congregation? I know it helps organizations, but what does it do for us? Well, I think sharing our plate gives us the opportunity to build connections with organizations and other communities. I hope it's not a substitute for building deeper relationships, but an invitation to begin those relationships. It allows us to put our money where our mouth is, to share our bounty, however large or small that is. It gives us an opportunity, I think, to learn more about the ways that our larger community, such as our LGBT Center, is caring for itself through the monthly presentation by the speakers we invite to join us. And I think I have heard evidence, both in books I've read and in direct evidence from colleagues, that it increases the generosity of the congregation as well. There's this worry that if we do this, we won't get enough money. I think that we feel like our money is doing good in the world, and we continue to give more. It provides us with an opportunity for learning, connection, and deepening relationships. Those are the reasons I think it's really important to do. Next question. What, if any, ecumenical outreach has UUCOD done in the local religious community? Ecumenical meaning connections with other congregations from other faith traditions. Well, I have to say I'm still new as your minister. I'm still learning the answer to this question, and we are still living into that answer as well. COVID has put a real crick in that work, I think. I know that during Reverend Suzanne's time with you as your minister, she and this congregation built relationships with other congregations in the area, doing justice work together, sharing worship and rituals with each other. Several people have shared about Martin Luther King Day celebrations that we've been part of. And there are many in the congregation who could speak better to that history than me at this point, and to the connections that you made and work that you did during early ministries with Reverend Ken and Reverend Paul, Reverend Barbara, and Reverend Julie, your other ministers. I know that this ecumenical work requires building relationships between individuals as well as between institutions. Right now, I and a few of our members are part of a newly growing Desert Interfaith Council. Through this group, I'm starting to get to know clergy colleagues in the area as well as some lay folks. And I'm hoping that as we move away from distancing, there will be more opportunities for learning and partnership. And we are the hosts in this building for the Desert Outreach Synagogue and the Insight Community of the Desert. I've been getting to know Rabbi King over the past few months, and I'm hoping to get to know the leadership and members of ICD as well. This is work we can share. It can be powerfully meaningful to work together to make things happen, to join hands in solidarity and shared labor. It's not just the minister's work, though. We can all visit and get to know other communities. And so I wonder what connections you want to make. I hope that you'll share them with me and with our leadership and reach out to other communities. I told you I was going to read these questions out without editing them. I'm going to tell you that right now. What's your secret to writing these incredible sermons week after week? That was not a plant. I did not. I'm a magpie. I like shiny things, I follow blogs about knitting and reading and science fiction and copy editing and comic books and justice issues and vegetarian cooking and crossword puzzles and BIPOC thinkers and leaders and I read a lot of books. I'm a good Unitarian Universalist. Nonfiction and fiction about all sorts of topics. And I listen to podcasts, to On Being and Brene Brown and Radiolab and podcasts about the Legion of Superheroes and Paradise Lost and Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. It's a great podcast, by the way, done by Adrienne Marie Brown and Toshi Regan about Octavia's parables. It's really, really excellent. Sometimes something will jump out from me with what I'm reading and learning and listening to. Sometimes I'll hear something that clicks with something I read. Sometimes I know I want or need to preach about a certain topic, and so I hunt down books and resources. I will tell you that each of the questions I received for this service could be its own sermon, sometimes more than one sermon. Some of these questions are our whole work, I think, in the world. Or there is a story or a reading or a poem that calls to me and asks me to build something around it. Naomi Shihab Knive's poem on kindness, the Name of the Tree story that I shared with you last year. And then I let it all stew, just bubble and bubble and bubble. And when I have an idea of what I want to talk about, I have to think about a framework for a specific service. What do I need to say? What's important about all of this? One of the things that is true for me when I hear someone else's sermons and my own, I always ask myself the question, so what? Now, that's not a nasty so what. It's a so what? What am I supposed to do or learn or realize from what I've just heard? So I hold that question in my head. Because I want you to be transformed by our worship services, not just the sermon, but by the service. I want you to be or feel or think differently from when you leave than you did when you arrived. I think it's important. So I look for that kernel in the mix of what I've read and pulled together. And then I do what you always have to do. I sit down and I write. Sometimes I start with an outline, sometimes just a set of ideas or a set of quotes. I want there obviously to be some structure, some flow to things. My high school English teachers sit on my shoulders. And I write. Sometimes it comes quickly. Sometimes I wrote here, it flows less easily, what went in my head was pulling teeth. Sometimes I want to carefully craft every syllable. Sometimes there are just bullet points. And it's always different, no matter what I've written, no matter what I walk out of my office with on a Sunday morning before the service, it's always different spoken aloud in this room than it is on the paper or the screen. You are a huge part of what a service ends up being. The music from our pianists and our choir, the images on our screen, the energy that shifts in the room as various things happen, all of that makes the sermon what it is. So thank you for helping make the sermons so wonderful. Next question. How do you love those that seem unlovable? This is what I mean by say some of these questions are our whole work in the world. And I have a few words to say about this now, but you bet I'll be preaching about it a lot. And it's not an easy answer. How do you love those that seem unlovable? By choosing to in each and every moment. By understanding that loving is not liking, it is not condoning, it is not agreeing with, it is not even spending time with. It is looking at someone and saying to ourselves out loud, I refuse to dehumanize you. I refuse to say you are a monster. I once had a congregant in another congregation come to me and say, I think I have to leave. I can't do that first principle. Aren't worth the dignity of every person, especially when it comes to this person. I just can't, not in the congregation, in their life. I just can't overlook their awfulness. And she told me a little bit about this person and their awful relationship, and we shared some tears and quiet affirmations, and that person had engaged in some truly awful behavior. And then I said, you can, of course, do what you want, though I hope you'll stay. And then I asked, what would it look like if you saw the first principle as an aspiration, something we strive towards imperfectly? What if we see it as a choice rather than a belief? I choose to act as if everyone has worth and dignity, whether I can see it right now or not. And not because it would be bad for that person if I do, but because it would be bad for me, for my heart, for how I see myself, to dehumanize. First, I think it's dangerous to separate the bad people from humanity because we then ignore our own capacity for evil, for unkindness, for bad behavior. If bad people are monsters, they are not us. And we start having a hard time seeing and responding to bad behavior in ourselves or in people we see as good people. My colleague Patrick McLaughlin wrote that when we call people who do horrible things monsters, we amputate the people we see as monsters from humanity so that we don't have to see the humanity in them and the inhumanity in us. And there is another reason that I try my hardest to avoid demonizing, to avoid hating, avoid separating from people from humanity in my mind, because it hurts me. It hurts my heart. It narrows my perspective and possibilities. It takes hold of me and it takes over. Booker T. Washington said, I will permit no man to narrow and degrade my soul by making me hate him. Now, I know you asked about love and not about worth or hatred. I go back over and over again to the definition of love I've shared with you, put forward by M. Scott Peck in The Road Less Traveled. He said, love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. Love is an act of will. We do not have to love. We choose to love. In many Buddhist practices, we are asked to offer loving kindness first to ourselves, then to those who are in close relationship with us, and then, most difficultly, to those with whom we are in conflict or who we experience as enemies or adversaries. We practice increasing the loving kindness in our hearts and in our worlds around us. It is a choice. And perhaps it's often too difficult a choice to make. It is for me sometimes. Maybe the first choice is just to decide not to hate. Decide not to dehumanize. Fight with fierceness against oppression and abuse. Find ways to remove ourselves and our loved ones from dangerous, abusive situations. Keep our families and neighbors safe in every way we can, but choose first not to hate. There are more sermons here and more work for all of us to do together. So I hope we can do that work together. We seem to be a congregation, starts the next question, with many people who are uncomfortable with the word God or Allah, and even more uncomfortable with the name Jesus. If we want to be more welcoming to people with a Christian background, what tips can you give the congregation about how to open ourselves up so that more people are comfortable with, or at least accepting of God, Jesus' language? So take a deep breath. I know that some of us come to this congregation, to this tradition, having grown up in communities where the religion of that community was abusive to us. It was negative, it demeaned our humanity, it asked us to change. I'm going to ask, one of the ways that we can be more accepting of other folks who use that language is to do our own healing work for our religious trauma. To choose to do the work, not to forgive necessarily or not to condone, but to say, what do I need to do? What healing do I need to do to move on from that? It's almost like saying, not all men, I apologize, but remember that there are many Christians out there who share our values and our vision for the beloved community, who support the charities that we support, who march in the marches that we march in, who are just as outraged, by the way, by the Roe versus Wade situation as we are. Remember that. That doesn't diminish what happened, but that is true. Another way you might find into it, so these are just sort of ways into it. Understand, and I don't mean to offend anyone by saying this, it's all metaphor. All of it. We have even those who believe in and worship God, one God, have no idea of who that God is. Jews are very careful with how they write the name of the Most Holy, because the Most Holy is beyond naming, beyond trapping in a finite form that's prone to decay and misuse. Muslims assert that Allah has 99 different names. And within Christianity, there are dozens of opinions and beliefs about what God is and how we should refer to the divine. It's a metaphor. Choose curiosity over certainty. And then know perhaps that the language that speaks to you most deeply might do nothing for the person sitting next to you here in this room. Or even it might disturb them in some way. What would it mean to get to a place where you might think, today, these words are healing for my neighbor, just as the words we had last week were healing for me? Maybe you might choose to translate in your head, what is most holy, most sacred to you? What do you understand you are responsible to beyond yourself? And think about those things when you hear these words. I was once scolded by a professor who said, so the sign of spiritual maturity is the ability to say the word God. I said, that's not what I mean. But what I mean is the ability to encounter it, to think about it, to do the work around it. We are not going to be talking about these things each and every week here. But I do think as we open our doors, as we want to do ecumenical work in the world, partner with Catholic and Muslim and Mormon organizations, we need to be able to be together and to understand each other's language and to understand the core of what drives us in this work. So those are some tips that I hope we're not too patronizing. But I think I'm one of the people, I need to do my own work around some stuff. And so I invite us into curiosity rather than certainty. So a lighter question. Not really. I know my views of the afterlife, writes the question writer, but I haven't been able to nail down the Unitarian Universalist view of the afterlife, reincarnation and such. Can you explain the official viewpoint on such an ethereal concept? This was the answer I wrote first, because I wrote this line here first. I think the official viewpoint is that there is no official viewpoint. Our views of the afterlife are as varied as our views on other central things. I do want to talk about this seriously, though. Our Universalist ancestors, for example, spent a great deal of time and thought and words figuring out what they thought happened after we died. that was so important to them. They were certain of one thing. None of us, not one of us, not even the most evil or unlovable among us was going to burn in hell for eternity. Not one of us. That's why they're universalists. There may be some appropriate punishment after life ended, they thought, and they argued about that a lot. But eventually, every single human being would be returned to the holy love from which they came, they believed. Everybody, kicking and screaming. I think it's pretty likely that we have people in our congregation or our wider community who believe in some form of heaven or transformed life after this earthly life ends. I think it's pretty likely that there are some who believe that our existence simply ends and that the matter and energy that we are recycled to be used by new life. I think it's very likely there are some people who believe in some form of reincarnation. And I think it's very likely that there are some people who don't even think about it at all. I think that our beliefs about what happens after death may be very important to us as individuals. But I think our tradition is more focused collectively on the here and now, on making the living world healthier and safer and more equitable for people, and for our environment and our planet. Whatever you believe about what happens after we die, I hope that what happens while we are alive and together is what stirs your hearts and minds toward building a better world. A couple more questions. I know I'm looking at our time, but some of these are interesting. What is your favorite Broadway musical? Well, that's almost as dangerous as asking me who my favorite doctor is on Doctor Who or what I like on my pizza. I'll get to the pizza later. There are 4 contenders, none of which came from after 1980, to be honest. I told the story of growing up listening to records, which I borrowed at random from the public library. Among those records were the early musicals of Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, Jesus Christ Superstar, and Evita. Joseph never did that much for me, but the other 2 are burned in my memory, and Evita, especially as sung by Elaine Page on the original 1979 concept album, stole my heart. It is the pinnacle of Lloyd Webber's partnership with Tim Rice, a wonderful melding of lyric and music. It has a fascinating musical structure called a rondo, where a main theme comes back over and over again with varying material in between. The main theme in Evita is, of course, the melody of Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. The lyrics and scoring of it change throughout the show. There is intentional contrast of parts of Eva Perón's personality, lyrical melodies when she is wooing the public, expressing love or self-doubt, and angular, disjointed, jumping music when she is political, demanding, or sarcastic. We scoff at Lloyd Webber often these days after the excesses of Cats and Phantom of the Opera, but Evita is still a glorious thing for me. Another record I found from the library was the Barbara Cook, Robert Preston recording of the original production of The Music Man from 1957. It's so stuck in its time, but there's lots there for a minister to ponder about showmanship and honesty and persuasion and charisma. And musically, there are many tunes that are lovely on their own, and then all of a sudden, Light a Rose gets sung at the same time as Sweet and Low, or 76 Trombones gets paired with Good Night, My Someone, and I'm in heaven. Other people may love Shirley Jones from the Partridge Family, but for me, she's always Marion the Librarian. In high school, I had the joy and privilege of playing Tevye the Dairyman in my school's production of Fiddler on the Roof. There is a question coming later about my call to ministry, and having to inhabit Tevye for a few months was a big step along the path of ministry to me. The tunes are memorable and fun and heartbreaking, of course, but it's the story of a family and a town figuring out how to hold on to their tradition in the face of racist and nationalist violence. That makes it stick with me. It's the story of a man proudly true to his tradition who is taught by his successively more progressive daughters that love is actually more important. That stuck with me. And so does the fact that Tevye argues with God every day. He's grateful and humble and has regular conversations with his God. I'm grateful for many things that happened to me in high school, but getting to play Tevye was at the top of that list. And finally, my dark secret. I love all of these shows for the reasons I mentioned, but if you made me choose my favorite musical, it would be Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. Sondheim's macabre creation from 1979. I remember seeing the PBS recording of the production starring George Hearn and Angela Lansbury and being smitten by it. It is clever and acidly witty. It is angry and heartbreaking. It is violent and joyfully dark. It doesn't turn away from the economic and social violence of history or the darkness and light that struggle in the human heart. Did I mention Angela Lansbury? Other Sondheim is wonderful, but Sweeney Todd is so much more, and if you made me say, I would say Sweeney Todd. When and how did you know you were called to ministry? Was it gradual, or did you have an aha moment? For me, it was a long, gradual process. I've worked in the church for much of my life since I was 9 and joined the choir at the Anglican Cathedral in my hometown. Now, at that church, joining the choir, thank you, choir, for your commitment to rehearsal and performance. At that church, joining the choir meant 90-minute rehearsals on Tuesday afternoon, Friday evening, and Saturday morning, and then 3 services on a regular Sunday, and we sang every week. There was a point when I was a teenager when I was at the church every day of the week except for Mondays. Since then, other than a couple of years when I started university and the year between the end of my ministry in San Diego and when I joined you as your assistant minister, I have continued to work in the church as a paid section leader in a choir in Toronto, as music director at 3 congregations and then seminary. When I was director of music ministry at James Reeb Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Madison, Wisconsin, what was then called the Unitarian Universalist Musicians Network, which is now the Association for Unitarian Universalist Music Ministries, AUM, started a new music leaders credentialing program, and I was in the inaugural class. I knew that I was feeling called to larger leadership in the congregation. I'd taken on more responsibilities during a ministerial transition. I'd served on the congregation's lay ministry team, I led the worship committee, and I served on the ministerial search team. I wanted more. As part of the credentialing program, we were expected to take some courses at a seminary, and so I was spending time on the website of Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago. One day, I clicked on the Master of Divinity program page and started reading. And something shifted in me, and I knew that that's what I most needed to do. I saw that I'd had this need for a while. I wanted to be part of a community in a different way. I wanted to be part of people's lives in a different way. So I went into the room and said to my husband, Mark, so what do you think about me and ministry? And his response was an immediate yes. When I told my minister at the time about my plans, he said, finally. I saw what had been going on in me for a long time. One of my colleagues was talking about call once and said, for some people, it is a single moment of realization. For me, he said, and for me, it was another step on the journey. Despite the fact that there was that one moment, for me, it feels like this has just been the journey of my life. I've done other things and done them well, but this is the thing that fits who I am and who I want to be in the world. It's an honor and a privilege to serve a congregation as its minister, to be invited into your lives so deeply, to be trusted and challenged and inspired by a thriving community, to do the hard work of building community together and building a world of love. Because ministry is not done by one person. It is the work of the whole community together, working toward healing and transformation together, learning and growing together, asking difficult, powerful questions and figuring out the answers, weaving the answers, dreaming the answers together. I'm looking forward to the next stages of our shared ministry together. And finally, the question many of you have been waiting for the answer to, pizza. Because I teased it with you last week, pizza. So in my congregation in Las Vegas, someone asked me, what do I like on my pizza? And I told you that that was the most dangerous answer I had to give. First, I will say, take a deep breath, that I am fine with pineapple on pizza in general. Did you know that Canadians invented the Hawaiian pizza? Anyway. As for my actual preferences for myself, despite living in Chicago and loving it, I'm thin crust all the way. And on the pizza, nothing but sauce and cheese. But I don't judge. Eat what you want to eat. Eat the pizza you want to eat. Don't yuck somebody else's yum. And you're laughing. And I'm glad you're laughing because it's kind of funny. But eat what you want to eat. You don't have to explain it to anybody. That is the end of the questions for this year. So we're going to sing again together. I invite you to rise in body or spirit. The words will be on the screen. We're singing hymn number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath. Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my day, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love. Please be seated.
Our board president just asked me to remind everybody that the congregational meeting will be at 11:30 here back in the sanctuary. And now join me. Oh, yes, I'm sorry, Linda. And also it'll be on Zoom. Okay, it'll be on Zoom for those at home on Sunday together. The link is in the email. Yes. Okay, now we'll extinguish our chalice. Please join me with the chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Often when these question sermons happen, someone asks me what my favorite hymn is. That was your answer. Again, I'll remind you about our annual meeting, and especially important today because we are voting on our congregation's adoption of the 8th principle, which we've been looking at and studying for the past few months. So I hope you will join us in any way that you are able to. The Buddha once said that hatred will never cease by hatred. It will only cease by love. As we go forth into the world, may our lives be given not to hate, but to love. Not to indifference, but to kindness, not to fear, but to hope. Go in peace, my friends, to love and serve the world.